They say the mirror never lies, but in the shadowed galleries of the Palacio Real, where oil paints hang heavy with the weight of forgotten ambitions, it whispers half-truths. The 1st of November, 1700. Madrid's air thick with the metallic tang of autumn rain seeping through cracked stone, and the scent of incense from a dozen chapels, cloying like regret. You stand there, not as a king, but as a shadow of one, your fingers trembling on the gilded frame of a portrait that stares back with eyes too wide, too vacant. The room echoes with the distant clamor of courtiers' silk rustling like dry leaves, murmurs rising like steam from a cauldron, but closer, always closer, the labored rasp of breath that isn't yours. Yours is shallow, a bird's flutter against ribs that cage a heart weary of beating. The sight before you, a face elongated, jaw thrust forward like a battering ram forged in flesh, lips parted in perpetual surprise, unable to close against the tongue that swells behind them. Drool pools on velvet collars, unheeded. This is no stranger. This is the end of a line, the last gasp of a machine that devoured its own gears. Charles II, they call him El Hechizado, the bewitched. But as his gaze meets yours, milky, unfocused, you see not sorcery, but the slow unraveling of blood turned poison. The physicians hover, their robes whispering conspiracies, one pressing a vial to his lips, the liquid bitter as bile, tasting of herbs crushed underfoot in distant apothecaries. He swallows without chewing, as always, the food of his final meal, lodging like accusations in his gut. Around you, the air grows heavier, the rain outside pounding like a war drum. No one dares answer. What kind of dynasty builds an empire on unions that bind flesh to flesh, only to watch it twist into torment? In the flickering candlelight, as his chest stills and the room falls silent, save for the drip of wax, you wonder, was this the hex, or the harvest of a garden sown too close? This wasn't sorcery. This was a machine, oiled with ambition, fueled by fear, and grinding toward collapse under the weight of its own repetitions. The Habsburgs, that sprawling web of crowns and thrones stretching from the misty Alps to the sun-baked coasts of the New World, did not fall to swords or sieges alone. No, their undoing whispered through veins, accumulated in the quiet chambers of wombs and nurseries, where the fruit of forbidden alliances emerged not as heirs, but as harbingers. Inbreeding, that clinical term for the deliberate folding of family trees until branches snap under their own load, wasn't mere eccentricity, it was policy, etched into ledgers of diplomacy and papal dispensations. From the marriage of Philip the Fair to Joanna of Castile in 1496, which fused Austrian might with Spanish gold, to the uncle-niece union of Philip IV and Mariana of Austria in 1649, that birthed the final, frail Charles II, the dynasty pursued purity at the cost of potency. Peer-reviewed studies, like those from the University of Santiago de Compostela, published in PLOS I in 2009, quantify it starkly. Inbreeding coefficients soared from 0.025 for the dynasty's founder to 0.254 for Charles, a level rivaling sibling unions, correlating with a 17.8% drop in child survival rates. These aren't myths spun by rival courts. They're corroborated by genealogies spanning 3,000 souls across 16 generations, etched in Vatican archives and Habsburg ledgers, cross-verified by modern genetics that traces recessive alleles like ghosts in the blood. Yet the question isn't whether you can stomach the deformities, the protruding mandibles that turned regal profiles into caricatures, the hydrocephalus swelling skulls like overripe gourds, the epilepsy seizing limbs in public farce. It's whether you're willing to remember the madness not as spectacle, but as symptom, the paranoia that hollowed Rudolph II's court in Prague, where he barricaded himself against shadows cast by his own kin, the vacant stares of Ferdinand I, whose edicts dissolved into gibberish amid the splendor of Vienna's ballrooms. This machine didn't just warp bodies, it eroded minds, amplifying recessive disorders until intellect frayed like threadbare tapestry. Recent scholarship, such as the 2019 Annals of Human Biology analysis of 66 portraits scoring mandibular prognathism against kinship, confirms the link. Higher inbreeding meant severer jaws, a recessive trait blooming in isolation. Contested? Marginally, some argue, genetic drift or portraiture bias inflated the jaws legend, but the data holds, with correlations at R equals 0.711, P equals 0.003, too robust for dismissal. These weren't isolated freaks, they were the system's output, a cautionary algorithm where power's protocol demanded erasure of outsiders, only to invite entropy within. The stakes? An empire where the sun never set, crumbled not from external foes, but internal rot, echoing today's silos of isolationism. Nations, corporations, even families that prize homogeneity over hybrid vigor, breeding fragility in the name of strength. We see it in boardrooms where nepotism stifles innovation, in echo chambers that amplify flaws into fanaticism. The Habsburgs remind us, bloodlines aren't ledgers to balance at any cost. They're ecosystems, fragile when pruned too tight. If you believe these twisted branches deserve to be mapped, not mocked, lest we replant the same seeds, consider subscribing. Every voice unearthed from the archives tips the scale toward understanding, away from oblivion. To understand the deformities that twisted Habsburg faces into masks of their own making, and the madness that turned thrones into traps, you must first grasp the machine that forged them. It wasn't born in malice, but in the cold calculus of medieval Europe, where crowns were currency and marriages the mint. The Habsburgs emerged from obscurity in the 11th century, their name derived from Habsburg, a falcon's castle perched on a Swiss crag overlooking the Aare River, built around 1020 by Radbot, a minor count whose lineage traced back to Guntram the Rich, a rebel against Otto I in 950. But powers forged truly heated in 1273, when Rudolf I was elected King of the Romans, wresting Austria and Styria from the fraying Holy Roman Empire in 1282, a gift to his sons Albert and Rudolf II that bound the family's fate to the Danube's winding course. By the 15th century, under Frederick III, the first Habsburg to wear the imperial crown in 1452, their motto crystallized: Bella gerunt alii, tu felix Austria nube, let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry. It was no jest. In an era of fractured fiefdoms, where the Black Death had culled a third of Europe's population by 1350, leaving labor shortages and peasant revolts from England to Bohemia, alliances weren't luxuries, they were lifelines. The Habsburgs, with their knack for wedding heiresses, Maximilian I to Mary of Burgundy, in 1477, netting the Low Countries' riches, wove a tapestry of territories: Burgundy, Tyrol, Bohemia, after Albert V's marriage to Elizabeth of Luxembourg in 1437, Hungary, through the same union's echoes. This was the political climate, a continent scarred by the Hundred Years' War's end in 1453, where France under Charles VII consolidated against English remnants, and the Ottoman Turks under Mehmed II sacked Constantinople in 1453, sending ripples of fear through Vienna's gates. Economically, Habsburg lands straddled trade arteries: the Rhine's silver from Swabian mines, Venetian silks via Tyrol, Baltic amber through Bohemian fairs, making control of passes and ports paramount. Militarily, they balanced precariously. Rudolf's 1,278 victory at Dürnkreuz over Ottokar II secured Austria, but constant skirmishes with Swiss Confederates and Hungarian rebels drained coffers. Social hierarchies rigidified under feudalism's yoke, with Rechtsritter free knights owing fealty to distant emperors, while serfs toiled on Hofmarken estates, their unrest quelled by Habsburg levies. Into this machine stepped the human elements, not as villains, but as vectors of its velocity. These events are documented in primary sources, like the Annales Austriae Chronicles of Austrian Benedictines, corroborated by archaeological finds such as the 15th century coin hoards from Wiener Neustadt excavations, and secondary analyses in works like Jean Wondruschka's Das Haus Habsburg, 1964, which passes papal bulls granting dispensation for cousin unions. He or she, in the case of those rare queens who steered the wheel, wasn't born a monster. They were manufactured, layer by layer, in the crucibles of expectation and isolation that turn nurseries into negotiations. Take Joanna of Castile, born 1479 to Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, the Catholic monarchs whose 1469 union forged Spain's spine. Joanna, the second of five, grew amid the Alhambra's Moorish arches, her childhood a blur of tutors drilling Castilian piety and Aragonese pragmatism. Her father, Ferdinand, was a hawk-nosed tactician, his dark eyes sharp as the lances that routed Moors at Granada in 1492. He doted on her with falconry outings, but his absences for Italian campaigns left her to her mother's iron faith, Isabella, golden-haired and unyielding, who pawned her jewels to fund Columbus's sails. By 1496, at 17, Joanna wed Philip the Fair, son of Maximilian I in Leer, a union sealing Habsburg access to Iberia's gold. Philip was a vision, tall, auburn curls framing a face of Burgundian charm, his court a whirl of Flemish tapestries and French chansons. But whispers followed Joanna's jealousy, flaring into rages, her refusal to veil before his mistresses earning her the moniker, the Mad, by 1504. After Philip's 1506 death plunged her into seclusion at Tordesillas, where she conversed with his preserved corpse for years, her mind fracturing under grief and the court's machinations. Isabella perished in 1504 of cancer, her body bloating in Valladolid's heat. Ferdinand remarried in 1505 to Germaine de Foix, dying in 1516 of a fever that masked heart failure, leaving Joanna nominal queen but powerless, her son Charles inheriting the throne at 16. Philip and Joanna's brood 6 children, 4 surviving carried the first kinks. Charles V, born 1,500 inches Ghent, was no infant prodigy. Hydrocephalus swelled his head, delaying speech until 5, his Habsburg jaw already hinting at the underbite that would garble his later orations. Raised in Mechelen's nurseries, under Margaret of Austria's watchful eye, his aunt, stern in black velvet, her own childless widowhood, a shadow Charles navigated a fractured upbringing. Flemish tutors drilling Latin, Spanish envoys demanding Castilian, his siblings' deaths pruning the tree early. Eleanor, born 1498, wed Manuel I of Portugal at 12, her fertility a dynasty's boon. Ferdinand, 1503, the spare who claimed Bohemia through guile. Mary, 1505, regent in the Netherlands, sharp-tongued and devout. Isabella, 1501, Queen of Denmark, her line fading in Nordic mists. But the losses mounted, 2 stillborns, a miscarriage, each a silent toll on Joanna's unravelling psyche. By Charles's teens, his great-uncle Henry VIII courted alliances, but the machine demanded inward turns. Charles wed his first cousin Isabella of Portugal in 1526. A double first cousin match her mother Joanna's sister, her father Manuel kin, through prior Habsburg veins, yielding Philip II in 1527, but Isabella's 1,539 death in childbirth scarred him. His abdication in 1556 whispered as melancholies yield. Philip II, born under Ghent's fog, inherited not just thrones but the tightening coil. His mother Isabella, petite with olive skin and Castilian fire, died at 35, her labours weakening a frame already taxed by protocol's corset. Philip, tutored by friars in Valladolid's cloisters, grew ascetic, his pale face framed by a ruff that hid an emerging prognathism, his speech lisping through the gap. At 16, he wed his father's niece, Maria Manuela of Portugal, double first cousin again, in 1543. She perished at 17, birthing Carlos. The heir whose hydrocephalus and epilepsy would brand him the Mad, confined by Philip in 1568 after a skull fracture in a fencing mishap, dying in 1568 at 23, his mind a storm of rages and visions. Philip's second union, to Mary I of England in 1554, was childless, her Bloody Mary phantoms of Protestant burnings haunting their bed. Third, to Elizabeth of Valois in 1559, yielded daughters but no sons. She died in 1568 of postpartum hemorrhage. Fourth, his niece Anna of Austria in 1570, uncle niece. F equals 0.0625 birthed 7, including Philip III in 1578, but the pattern etched deeper. Infant mortalities climbing. As a 2013 heredity study notes, with inbreeding depression purging weak alleles, yet amplifying recessives, like mandibular deficiency. The descent accelerated. Philip III, indolent, with a jaw that drooped like melting wax, wed his double first cousin Margaret of Austria in 1599, her father, Charles II of Inner Austria, his great-uncle, yielding Philip IV in 1605, amid a court rife with Valido favourites like Lerma, whose corruption mirrored the king's detachment. Margaret, pious and plain, bore 11, but saw 8 perish young, her death in 1611 from fever, leaving Philip III to remarry briefly, childless. Philip IV, the planet king, ascended at 16 inches 1,621, His reign a baroque blaze of Velázquez canvases and Calderón autos sacramentales, but shadowed by losses. His first wife, Elizabeth of Bourbon, 1615 Union, a French balm to 30 years' war wounds, died in 1644 after 13 pregnancies, 8 surviving infancy, including the future Louis XIV's mother, but her stillborn son in 1640 a blow. Then Mariana of Austria, his niece Philip III's daughter, in 1649, F equals 0. 125, birthing Maria Theresa in 1638 miscarriage, victim. And, after years of barren dread, Carlos in 1661, the boy whose cries were feeble as distant thunder. Carlos's advent marked the nadir. Born in Madrid's Alcazar, the 6th of November 1661, amid gunpowder from Philip's Portuguese siege, he emerged misshapen, head elongated, limbs limp. Mariana, 18 and hollow-eyed from court intrigues, nursed him till 5, but physicians despaired. Hydrocephalus, the jaw so prognathic he couldn't masticate. Epilepsy's grip by adolescence. Siblings? None. Prior pregnancies failed, the machine's output barren. Tutors despaired at his vacancy. Confessor Eberhard, claiming demonic hex exorcisms in 1,670 seconds, amulets of saints pressed to his brow. By 1665, Philip IV perished, gout-riddled and jaw-locked, whispering Garda beware to his grandson, the 4-year-old king. Mariana regent, her Austrian kin like Nittard pulling strings, exiled in 1669 for plotting. Carlos, isolated in Buen Retiro's gardens, hunted falcons with hands that shook, his mind a fog where piety warred with phantoms. 2 marriages: Marie-Louise of Orleans in 1679, dead at 26 without issue. Maria Anna of Neuburg in 1690, her fertility mocked by miscarriages sealed the sterility. A 2021 BMJ Neurology Open posits aspartyl glucosaminuria, a lysosomal disorder recessive in their inbred pool, explaining his cascade, intellectual disability, dysarthria, recurrent infections. But sources diverge. Contemporary diaries like those of French envoy Daunoy describe his idiocy vividly, yet Venetian dispatches contest the depth, claiming political exaggeration by rivals like Louis XIV. What we know for certain, per the 2009 Pelo's 1 pedigree analysis, is the coefficients climb. Each union a multiplier, turning vitality to vapor. And then everything changed, or rather, calcified. In the summer of 1675, as plague gnawed Madrid's outskirts and Ottoman drums echoed from Vienna's plains, young Carlos, 14 and king in name only, collapsed during a hunt in El Pardo's oaks. The fall wasn't from saddle but seizure, his body arching as if electrocuted by divine wrath, foam flecking lips already slack. Courtiers froze, the air sharp with pine resin and horse sweat, Mariana's scream shattering the tableau. This wasn't the first tremor episodes had whispered since infancy, dismissed as vapors, but now, in the machine's creaking heart, it roared. Physicians, robed in the era's humoral folly, bled him with lancets and leeches, their humors unbalanced by black bile's excess. Yet beneath the lancets lay truth, recessive alleles, hoarded like contraband, erupting in neural storms. Rudolph II's paranoia, in 1576 Prague, barricading against poison mirrors, echoed here. Ferdinand eyes 1,830 seconds gibberish edicts, hydrocephalus bloating his brow till it burst in 1835 revolution. The turning point wasn't one event, but the cascade. Charles's 1,680 puberty, when impotence revealed itself, his marriage's diplomatic charades. In 1694, as France's son king amassed troops for partition, Charles's court fragmented Valido Oropesa exiled, Mother Mariana dead of fever in 1689, her body shipped to Austria in brine. The boy king, now man in frame if not mind, wandered Escorial's halls, conversing with saints in lisps, his decrees dissolving into whims. This was the machine's pivot, from expansion to entropy, where deformity wasn't a dormant but anchor, madness, not eccentricity, but engine failure. What I'm about to describe isn't random affliction, it's a system 5 distinct acts, each a phase in the dynasty's genetic ledger, designed not to conquer flesh but to compound its collapse. Each reveals how inbreeding's invisible arithmetic eroded the Habsburg spirit, from skeletal scaffolds to synaptic storms, fertility's famine to familial fractures. These aren't tales of isolated woe, They're the dynasty's diagnostics, drawn from pedigrees and portraits, where the jaws jut measured not vanity, but vulnerability. First came the forge of the frame, the skeletal distortions that turned regal postures into parodies. It began subtly, in the 16th century's Milanese mists, where Charles V, born 1500, inbreeding coefficient, a modest 0.038, hunched under hydrocephalus' swell, his skull, a balloon distended by cerebrospinal floods, delaying his crawl till 2, speech till 5. The setting: Ghent's ducal palace, February chill seeping through tapestried walls, the air heavy with wool dyes and midwife's herbs as Joanna laboured, her cries mingling with Burgundian carillons, tolling for a prince who emerged limp, head lolling like an overripe pear. Courtiers in slashed doublets and codpieces averted eyes from the wet nurse's frantic bundling, while Maximilian's envoys tallied alliances amid the birthing blood. Politically, this was the eve of the 1506 League of Cambrai, Habsburgs allying with Pope Julius II against Venice's lagoons. Economically, Flemish looms churned velvet for Spanish galleons. The New World's gold, a distant gleam. Sensory layers built the dread, the metallic tang of blood on linen, the low hum of Flemish prayers in guttural Dutch, the chill touch of silver crucifixes pressed to fevered brows. Charles, the adult victim here at 26, when symptoms peaked, had by then inherited thrones from grandfather Ferdinand in 1516, his body a battlefield. Before the warp, he was the wunderkind, tutored in Toledo's alcazars, fluent in 5 tongues, his mind sharp as Toledo's steel despite the ache. But the hydrocephalus, recessive alleles doubled from cousinly parents, manifested in migraines that felled him during 1525 Pavia's siege, his helmet too tight on the swollen dome. He endured trepanations in 1,530 seconds. Augsburg, drills boring skull to drain fluid, the aftermath, a fog of nausea where velvet gloves stuck with pus. No graphic gouge, the implements were heated probes, implication in the surgeon's grim nods but the psychological scar. Charles abdicating in 1556 Eustace Monastery, whispering to friars of a head too heavy for a crown, his faith fracturing into melancholic vigils. This wasn't about one emperor's ache. This was about a system engineering obsolescence, where uncle-niece unions like Philip IV and Mariana's in 1649 hoarded variants for mandibular prognathism, a polygenic recessive per the 2019 Annals study, correlating 22% with kinship. Power structures calcified around it. Habsburg Erblande, hereditary lands demanded pure blood to legitimize claims, papal dispensatio from Urban VIII in 1629 greenlighting the taboo, turning deformity into divine right. Broader patterns? The 30 Years' Wars 1618 to 1648 carnage, 8 million dead, stemmed partly from Ferdinand II's zeal, his own jaw hinting at the load. Modern parallels scream isolated communities like Pakistan's consanguineous belts, where 50% cousin marriages yield 2 to 3% hydrocephalus spikes, per WHO data, mirroring Habsburg infant mortalities 10 à 8% plunge. Scholars debate. Villas et al. Affirm the jaw's recessivity, but some, like 2021 BMJ's aspartyl glucosaminuria hypothesis for Charles II, contest single-gene primacy, arguing multifactorial malaise. Long-term? Society's scarred. Spain's 1,700 succession war, 1.2 million dead, born of heirless thrones. They didn't want anomalies, they wanted assets. But ghosts of warped bones haunted ledgers, eroding the social fabric where peasants mocked Habsburger Unterlippen in broadsheets, resistance brewing in 1640 Catalonia revolts. The machine ground on, but each jutting chin a crack in the facade. But the forge heated further, the bones not just bent but brittle, Fertility's forge yielding barren hearths. Transitioning from Charles V's cloistered pains, the dynasty's women bore the brunt, their wombs the machine's measure. In the sweltering July of 1649, Madrid's Alcazar, baked under Andalusian sun, jasmine wilting in royal parterres as Mariana of Austria, 15 and trembling in cloth of gold, wed her uncle Philip Cat. The hall thrummed with lutenist strings and the sizzle of roast peacock, courtiers in starched ruffs, inhaling the spice of Moroccan tagines. But beneath the pomp, the air thickened with dread. Her mother had been Philip's sister-in-law, the union a dispensatio from innocent ex, F equals 0.125. Politically, this was post-Westphalia's 1648 truce, Habsburgs clinging to Spanish Netherlands amid French ascendance. Economically, American silver floods devalued, inflation gnawing Alcabala's taxes. Sensory immersion, the velvet crush of her train on marble, the metallic bite of communion wine masking nausea, the courtier's whispers like moth wings against her ear. Mariana, the adult victim at 18 when pregnancies commenced, was no fragile flower before. Raised in Vienna's Hofburg under Ferdinand III's scholarly eye, her father, bearded and bookish, debating alchemists, till dawn, she arrived fluent in Latin, her wit sparkling in dispatches to Sister Claudia. Devout, with hazel eyes and a dancer's grace, she dreamed of motherhood as piety's pinnacle. The lead-up stretched. 1,650 miscarriage, blood-staining escorial silks, 1,650, 2 stillbirth, the chamber silent, save for Mariana's keening. Then 1,657's Felipe Prospero, hydrocephalic, dead at 4 in 1661, his tiny frame autopsied for water in the brain, per court physician Vallejo's notes. Sensory restraint, throats parched from vigils, stomachs hollow with fasting, the implication in the midwives' averted gazes as forceps clattered. By 1661, Carlos emerged, but Mariana's labours, 13 total, per Gazeta records, left her racked postpartum fevers, claiming her in 1689, her gaze adrift in final hours, whispering Dios lo quiere. Her resistance? Enduring. Commissioning Velázquez's portraits where her chin's subtle jut defied pity, her letters to Austria pleading for heirs untainted. This act exposed the system's sterility calculus. Inbreeding halved fertility, per 2024 American Journal of Biological Anthropology's Habsburg maternal mortality analysis. With F is greater than 0.1 queens, 2.5 times likelier to perish in childbirth. Powers architecture? Limpieza de sangre statutes from 1449 Toledo Inquisition barred impure blood, extending to royals via valido enforcers like Olivares, whose 1,620 seconds policies funneled alliances inward. Fits broader erasure. Europe's 80% noble consanguinity by 1600, but Habsburgs peaked at 90%, per Wondrushka. Modern echo. Amish communities Ellis, Van Creveld syndrome from founder effects, 1 to 200 incidents versus global, 1 to 60, 000. Debate rages. 2009 PLOS pins, 92% extinction odds on inbreeding, but 2013 heredity notes purging of lethals mitigated some, though not enough. Charles II's impotence, speculated as pituitary deficiency, sealed it. Impacts? Demographic voids. Spain's population stagnated at 7 million post-1600 plagues, airlessness fueling 1,701 Utrecht partitions. They sought dynasts, not daughters of dust. But Mariana's vacant stare dismantled the weave, ghosts of unborn sons unraveling the empire's hem. While wombs withered, minds unraveled next, the neural nets fraying into paranoia and void. From Mariana's fading echoes, the court turned to Rudolf II's 1,580 seconds Prague, where autumn fogs cloaked the Radshin's spires. The Vltava's murmur, a counterpoint to alchemists' bubbling retorts. October 1581, Rudolf 28, F equals 0.063, from cousinly parents ascended fully after Maximilian II's fevered end, the coronation's incense acrid, with sulphur from Tycho Brahe's observatory. Setting: Ratchini's Golden Lane, dwarfed cottages housing astronomers, the air sharp with varnish from Spranger's canvases, and the yeasty tang of Bohemian brews. Courtiers in slashed velvets, ruffs starched with starch from Dutch imports, navigated Rudolph's growing gloom amid Ottoman threats. Suleiman's 1,566 siege scars fresh. Sensory build-up, the chill draft from casements rattling like accusations, the low chant of Jesuit confessors, the touch of astrolabes cold as betrayal. Rudolf, the adult afflicted at 30 when shadows deepened, was no fool before. Heir to Ferdinand, eyes intellect his father, epileptic and bloated, debating Lutherans till 1564's death, he patronized Kepler's ellipses, his cabinet, a wonder, Dürer's rhinoceros sketches, oriental clocks ticking futures unseen. Tension coiled, 1,000, 580 seconds visions, whispers of demons in the mirrors, paranoia peaking in 1598, confinement by Brother Ernst, his rages shattering goblets in arcaded halls. No gore, the manacles were velvet-lined, implication in the guard's averted eyes as he raved of Habsburg kin as serpents in eagle feathers. Aftermath: 1608 withdrawal, ceding Hungary to Matthias, his mind a labyrinth where genius birthed melancholia. Eyes angel, wings clipped by doubt. Resistance? Enduring, commissioning Bassano's hunts where his gaze pierced fog, defying the void. This wasn't one archduke's delusion. This was psychological warfare internalized, inbreeding, doubling schizophrenia risks via homozygosity per 2019 genetic models. Structures? Imperial Reichstag diets demanded Habsburg unity, but Rudolf's isolation bred 1618 defenestration, sparking 30 Years' War. Patterns: Europe's manic royals, England's George III's Porphyria madness in 1788, debated as bipolar. Parallels: isolated cults' messianic breaks, 20% higher psychosis in endogamous groups. Scholarship splits: 2013 Heredity affirms depression's purge, but 2021 Neurology Open links Charles II's epilepsy to distal renal acidosis, contested by thin diagnostics. Contemporary autopsies like 1700s on Charles, revealing atrophied glands, but no DNA. Impacts? Fragmented empire, Bohemia lost, 30% population cull. They craved control, not chaos. But Rudolf's barricades bred rebellion, the social cord fraying where burghers mocked the Emperor of the Moon. The fourth act shifted to public farce, epilepsy's seizures staging the dynasty's decline in spotlit shame. From Rudolf's shadowed arcades, flash to Ferdinand I's 1835 Viennese opera, where gaslights flickered on ball-gowned throngs, the air perfumed with a tar of roses and sweat from 1848's brewing storms. May 1838, Ferdinand 35, F, is approximately equal to 0.2 from diluted but persistent loops, convulsed mid-waltz in Hofburg's mirrored halls, his frame crumpling amid valse violins' screech. Setting: Spring thaws mud, tracked on parquet. The Danube's freshet roared distant, courtiers in frock coats clutching monocles as guards in Pickelhauben rushed. Politically, Metternich times Karlsbad, decrees times post 1819, stifled liberals, but Hungarian diets chafed. Economically, Zollverein tariffs integrated German states, Habsburgs lagging. Sensory: the slip of kid gloves on marble, the sour tang of spilled champagne, the collective gasp like wind through lindens. Ferdinand, adult at 25 when enthroned in 1835 after Francis II's aneurysm, was no cipher pre-seizure. Son of minor inbreeding parents' first cousins once removed, he navigated tutors' drills, his piety genuine, commissioning Strauss waltzes despite the throb. Lead up: hydrocephalus from birth, head misshapen, epilepsy flaring post 1830, Baden attempt, where a blade nicked but didn't pierce. The act: 1848 revolutions spark, his archduke, I am the emperor, and I want dumplings. Gibberish amid barricades, implication in the regent's nods as he signed blanks. Aftermath: abdication in 1848 Olmütz, exile to Prague's Hradčin, his faith unbroken in rosaries clutched through fits. This exposed the system's neurological sabotage. Inbreeding's 3x epilepsy hike per 2009 plus, recessives unmasked. Power, Staatskonferenz cabals bypassed him, echoing Rudolf. Patterns: Byzantine emperors' porphyric rages, modern, isolated Amishes 1-100 seizures versus 1-1000 global. Debate: 2019 study ties jaw to recessives, but Ferdinand's hydrocephalus contested as environmental scarlet fever, yet pedigree holds. Impacts: 1,848 uprisings toppled thrones, 200,000 dead. They desired decree, not disorder. Ferdinand's stammers sowed sedition, the fabric tearing where Burschenschaften students decried the good Ferdinand's farce. Finally, the fifth act: infertility's absolute, the barren throne that toppled crowns. Culminating from Ferdinand's abdication echoes, rewind to Charles II's 1680 Eliscorial nuptials, where summer haze veiled Aranjuez's fountains, the air sticky with orange blossoms masking decay. April 1679, Charles 17, F equals 0.254 wed Marie-Louise in Madrid's Almudena, her French silks whispering against his brocades, the chapel's frankincense choking on candle smoke. Setting, post 1678, Nijmegen peace, Louis XIV's annexations gnawing Spanish fringes. Economically, silver remittances halved by Dutch raids. Sensory, the rustle of her train on flagstones, the bitter almond taste of marzipan fetid, the courtiers' murmurs like bees in boxwood hedges. Charles, adult at 18, was no brute pre-vows. Despite vacancy, he cherished falcons, his piety fervent in Te Deums, mind flickering with lucid hunts. Tension, bedchamber dread, physicians probing post, nuptials, revealing atrophy, pituitary dwarfism, perspeculation. No intrusion, the sheets remain pristine. Implication in Marie-Louise's 1689 tearful letters home. Dead, at 26 of consumption, her gaze hollow. Remarriage to Maria Anna in 1690 yielded miscarriages, Charles's impotence absolute, his confessions to Eberhard laced with shame. This wasn't personal failure. This was systemic sabotage. Inbreeding's 50% fertility / 2024, AJBA confirming maternal risks. Structures, pragmatic sanction. 1713, desperate for males, but void. Patterns, Ptolemaic Cleopatras's barren ends. Parallels, Yemen's 40% cousin infertility spikes. Contested, 2009 PLOS, 92% extinction attribution, but 2013, heredity notes adaptation. Yet Charles's line snapped. Impacts, 1701, succession war, Bourbon ascent. They built for eternity, but barren beds birthed oblivion, the weave wholly unwound. If you're still here, it's because you sense the weight of what follows isn't just history's dust, but a mirror held to our own machinations. What comes next is the fracture, the moment the gears stripped bare. While Charles II wandered Escorial's echoing vaults, destroying not realms but his own legacy with each futile embrace, he made one crucial error, trusting the machine to mend itself. The conspiracy brewed not in shadows, but in the sunlit salons of Vienna and Madrid, where regents and rivals plotted partition long before his breath faltered. The chief conspirators? A web of uncles and envoys. Leopold I, his Austrian great uncle, bearded and bespectacled in Hofburg's war rooms, motivated by salvaging Habsburg scraps from Spanish ruin, Bohemia, and Hungary, secure, but the Netherlands ports vital against French hunger. Then Louis XIV, the Sun King, powdered and absolutist at Versailles, driven by Gloire, annexing Flanders, Milan, Naples, to crown his grandson Philip of Anjou. England under William III, stadtholder in orange sashes, sought balance clipping French wings to safeguard Dutch trade, his agents like diplomat Stratfield, whispering terms in The Hague's fogged canals. Spain's own Oropesa, the Valido in black habit, conspired from within, his Jesuit vows masking ambition to install a Portuguese puppet, preserving Catholic purity amid Protestant tides. Motivations intertwined. Leopold's piety clashed with realpolitik, Louis's expansionism veiled as Bourbon right, William's mercantilism, a bulwark against absolutism. Even the papacy under Innocent XII hedged, his briefs equivocating on dispensatio fallout. The plot unfolded in ink and intrigue, the 1698 Treaty of The Hague its pivot, partitions sketched on vellum, Spain ceded to Joseph Ferdinand of Bavaria, a neutral babe, low to avert war, but his 1699 death at 6 from hydrocephalus, irony's twist, unraveled it. Envoys shuttled. French Comte d'Harcourt to Madrid with bribes, Austrian Count Fuentes smuggling Charles's will favouring Louis's line. By 1700, as Charles's gut rebelled against unchewed pheasant, the bedchamber became battlefield. Maria Anna pressing the codicil, naming Philip V, her Neuburg kin pulling levers. He aimed his fragility at the wrong arbiter, Europe itself, a continent of condottieri, tired of Habsburg ghosts. Present tense grips the end. The 1st of November 1700, Madrid's Palacio del Buen Retiro. Charles slumps in damask sheets, physician's files clinking like judgment. "I leave it to him who has most blue blood," he rasps, quill scratching Philip of Anjou's name, the blade of finality entering not flesh, but fate. He perishes at 38, breath halting in a gurgle, The room's air stagnant with vinegar compresses. Aftermath sprawls. We'll read. Versailles erupts in Te Deum anthems. Vienna in fury, Leopold mobilizes 200,000. Marlborough's English levies marching. Conspirators scatter. Oropesa, exiled to monasteries. William III, dead of pneumonia, in 1702. Louis triumphant, till Blenheim's 1,704 rout. Power transfers bloodily. Philip V crowned in Toledo 1701, but Catalonia revolts for Archduke Charles. Grand Alliance fleets torching Vigo. Thousands perish. Bourbon lines claim Spain. Habsburgs cling to Austria. Utrecht, 1,713 carving the corpse. Gibraltar to Britain. Milan to Austria. Chaos reigns. 1. 25 million dead. Economies gutted. Asientos trade pacts auctioning slaves to fund the fray. Other deaths? Felipe V's madness bouts, institutionalizing in 1,737. Charles VI, 1,740, end sparking Austrian succession. Maria Theresa's wars. This is what happens when the machine breaks. It devours everything, shards embedding in successors' souls. The system survived, but mangled Habsburg eagles clipped, Bourbon lilies wilted in Iberian soil. It's not about crowns or cadavers. It's about what power does when it tries to hoard itself, and what happens when the hoard turns toxic, refusing to dissolve. The discovery came not in palaces, but in the quiet grind of labs, where modern tools exhumed the dynasty's buried code. Picture it. March 2019. Santiago de Compostela's genetics wing, fluorescent hum over humming sequencers. As Roman Vilas professor, with wire-rimmed glasses and a Galician lilt, stared at screens blooming with data. His team, a dozen strong in white coats stained with coffee, had fed 66 portraits into algorithms, maxillofacial surgeons scoring 18 dysmorphic traits, mandibular angles, lip eversions, nasal humps, no dusty tomes alone. This was portraiture as pedigree. Velázquez's brushstrokes calibrated against kinship coefficients from a 6,000 soul tree spanning 20 generations. The find? A correlation. R equals 0.711, P equals 0.003. Inbreeding didn't just correlate with the jaw, it sculpted it. Recessive alleles for prognathism and maxillary deficiency blooming in isolation, explaining 22% variance. Methods: rigorous univariate regressions. Principal component analyses, dated not by carbon, but computation, cross-verified against 2009 PLOS pedigrees. What it proved: the Habsburg face wasn't drift or artist's whim, but homozygosity's harvest, genetic fitness halved, extinction's math laid bare. Why it matters ripples forward. Connect to today. In an era of genomic silos, think CRISPR's ethical quagmires or dating apps' echo chambers. We risk Habsburg echoes, narrowing pools till recessives resurface. Psychological insights? Inbreeding depression isn't just physical, it's cognitive, amplifying disorders like Charles II's speculated aspartyl glucosaminuria, a 2021 BMJ hypothesis, tying his epilepsy and infertility to lysosomal glitches, contested but compelling against 1,700 autopsies withered testes. Parallels scream, Yemen's 30% cousin marriages yield 4x congenital risks. Ultra-Orthodox enclaves Tay, sacks, spikes. Remembering? It inoculates. The 2013 heredity purging model shows selection culls, lethals, but slowly, Habsburg's 17.8% survival dip a warning for modern isolations, from refugee camps to corporate dynasties. Victory redefined. They didn't outlast, their bones teach. The empire endured 600 years, but couldn't bury the jaw's jut in portraits that endure. Think on that. 18 dysmorphics, faith in flawed frames, refusing erasure. Charles II was meant to disappear. That was the plan, the final flourish in a ledger of lineages. His frail form, the period at empire's end, consigned to footnotes and frescoes where light fades flesh to fable. But he didn't vanish, nor the twisted kin who preceded him, their profiles etched not just in oil, but in the unyielding code of consequence. They're still here, in the pixelated pedigrees of Santiago labs, where algorithms resurrect jaws from JPEGs, coefficients climbing like vines over forgotten graves. In the archives that refused to burn Vatican's secretum bulls granting uncle-niece grace, Escorial's ledgers tallying miscarried hopes. In the ground, archaeologists sifted at Uster in 2018, unearthing Charles V's lead casket, its seals cracked to reveal bones bowed by hydrocephalus. CT scans confirming the swell that shadowed his abdication. And now they're here with you, in the scroll of this screen, the pause before your next breath, because you chose immersion over indifference. You chose to trace the threads from Habsburg's crags to Charles's creaking throne, witnessing the warp without wince. El Hechizado, they named him, the bewitched, but in his final scrawl, Yo, Carlos, etc., a simple declarative, echoing the opening chill, a mirror that doesn't lie, but reflects the cost of closed circles. To be a witness isn't passive, it's pact, a vow to map the madness so it doesn't metastasize anew. These stories matter because they humanize the horror, not freaks in finery, but families frayed by formula, their pathologies, a primer on power's peril. They connect to today genetic counseling clinics, counseling against cousin calls, diversity mandates in C-suites staving off Habsburg homogeneity, even your family tree app flagging potential loops with polite pings. We owe the past precision, not pity, but propagation of their proof, that inbreeding's illusion of invincibility invites implosion. The Habsburgs ruled realms where eagles soared unchained, but chained themselves to blood too thick to flow, their deformities a diagram of denial. If this narrative stirred something a chill at the jaw's jut, a spark at the system's sabotage, leave a comment below. What deformity echoes loudest for you? The physical fold or the mental maze? Share your reflections, your questions on how history's horrors haunt our headlines. These dialogues, these grapples with the grotesque, are the antidotes, conversations that convert curiosity to caution, ensuring the machine's remnants rust unused. If you believe these spectral sovereigns deserve daylight, not dust, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for the silences yet to shatter. Every untold union, every unearthed urn, a step from repetition. Charles II reigned 35 years, erected a machine that schooled every future dynasty in the art of self-sabotage, and the blueprint never vanished. But neither did the resistance, the quiet refusal of flesh to forget, of portraits to prettify, of data to dissolve.